Zookeepers of Reddit, what's the most human-like behavior you've witnessed in animal display? I want to be a zookeeper. So I did a volunteer thingamajigger at the San Diego Safari Park. Our instructor was an elephant trainer. She said it's normal for the zookeepers to leave dead elephants in their enclosure for a day or two, so the elephants can mourn the loss of an elephant. Cries, standing around the body, signs of depression. My dog once thanked me. He was trying to find a comfortable position on his pallet, but it was all wrinkled and folded over itself. So after he grumpily plopped down, I went over and tugged at the corner of it. My dog looked at me and then got up. I fixed it for him and he laid down, so I went to sit down. A beat later, my dog got up and walked over to me. He licked my knee and went back to lay down. That's one of the reasons that I consider my dog was a person instead of an animal. I work at the San Diego Zoo and the peacocks love attention. They fan out their feathers at routine times every single day in the same exact spots, just for the crowds of people to come and give them attention. They do this with no peahens in sight. It's kinda funny. During penguin nesting season, I once saw a rockaper couple who had built a nest way up high at the top of a mountain of rocks. The lady of the house decided that she needed to redecorate the home and sent the male to find a suitable rock to add to the decor. As he hopped down the rocks, he was squawked at and pecked at by several other rockapers with nests, getting beat up all the way down to the ground where he started looking for pebbles. He finds one he likes and ascends up the mountain to once again brave the very territorial, biting, screeching rockapers along the way. She lays the pebble down for his missus, and she slaps the shit out of him. She hates it. Immediately getting the point, he returns for a third pass at now even more pissed off rockhoppers back to the ground. This time, he's not playing. He spends a good 10 minutes looking for a rock that he likes. And boom. There it is. He tries to pick the rock up and immediately drops it. He tries again. Drops it. He tries one final time and it's just too big for him to carry. So his response? He throws his head back, flails his flippers about, and cries to the sky. I did not see him return home for the rest of my shift. I worked in South Africa for a bit last year. We have 4 giraffes on the prairie, one of which was a lovely lady named Camille. One day they were roaming at the fence neighboring the farm next door, where a kudu named Charles lived. Google what a kudu is. They're cool looking. Camille and Charles absolutely fell in love. For days they stayed at the fence and wouldn't leave. Finally, Charles decided he'd had enough. He jumped the big ass fence, a fence large enough for a giraffe, and now spends his days roaming our property with Camille. The people next door were really awesome and let him stay with us. Finally, a question I can answer. While I'm not officially a zookeeper yet, I'm the girl in charge of scooping shit out of the Komodo dragon cage and various other reptiles. Mr. Komodo and I have a little tradition. I go into his fine establishment, mop away a basketball-sized slosh of excrement, and taking a step away, he'll immediately let it go in the same spot that I cleaned up. Though this isn't really what can be considered human-like, I'm always amused about how the moment I appear Mr. Komodo spreads his legs in preparation. He doesn't lash at me either, which is something he does even at the person who feeds him. Zookeeper here. Seeing ring-tailed lemurs literally laid out flat on their backs on the grass on a sunny day. Also a lemur casually sat on a post with one knee raised and resting his arm on said knee. The other hand was holding onto the mesh. Casual as fuck. Oh, and a mandrill getting pissed off and throwing his toy away when he couldn't figure out how it worked. Actually, as a keeper and one of our ocelots will eat anything and everything, even though he has a sensitive stomach and knows he'll puke. His specialty is catching opossums or squirrels and eating everything but the head, which he carefully positions in full view of the public next morning. We also have a family group of gibbons, parents, a subadult, and a baby. In the wild, young adult gibbons stay with their parents for a few years and learn how to take care of their younger sibling to prepare them for parenthood. Our young male, who is the equivalent if a 12 to 13-year-old human, once tried to grab the baby from mom, who smacked him upside the head. She then went back to teaching the toddler to climb by sitting next to the wire of the fence, letting her baby get 6 inches off the ground, then clutching him back to her chest because that was high enough. I work with exotic animals, though not in a zoo yet. We have a marmoset, little monkey, that does lots of little, oddly human things, but her most recent / most creepy thing is her new method of asking for food. If you've got something, and you aren't sharing, she'll sit in the corner of her enclosure, then turn, look over her shoulder, and look up at you with background eyes, until you give in, or she gets mad. She looks just like a little girl bribing her father. We aren't really sure where she got it from. We kept a wood duck in our butterfly house exhibit at my previous workplace. When he was in his full glory, with his beautiful colors and feathers, he would be all up in everybody's face and would want attention, attention, attention. But as soon as he molted into his drab colors for the summer, he would sulk and be cranky and hide in his pond. Shows off when he's pretty, hides out when he's not at his best. Pretty human to me. Former zookeeper here. I mostly worked in the reptile house and with reptiles and large rodents for educational shows. However, I did a bit of work with some mountain lions and a very fat black bear named TJ. The mountain lions were an absolute trip because, get this, they played hide and seek, not even 100% predatory behavior. They would run behind trees until you found them. They are still cats, with the impression that hiding their heads makes them invisible. Come out, swat you on the ass, and go hide behind something else. TJ was one of the laziest animals I have ever met. I regularly found him lying down, eating food out of his dish, off of his stomach Baloo style with his legs spread in the direction of the oncoming breezes. I know this sounds stupid, but I'm pretty sure my dog went through a grieving process and period of depression when his mom died. She was 7 when she had him, and he was the only puppy to survive. They never spent a day apart until she died aged 15. When she died, I literally think he cried. Like his eyes leaked. Maybe it was just windy that day, or maybe he always does that, but I never picked up on it, but it broke my heart. He's a very big energetic Springer Spaniel, and he is the best dog in the world. He is a ray of sunshine and my best friend. He would never do anything to hurt anybody. He always wants to cuddle and play. But for 2 or 3 weeks after his mom died, he didn't want to play, and he had no energy. He only got out of his little bed to eat, and drink and poop. He wouldn't even come for walks. Again, has a very big strong dog, so if you put the leash on him, he'd just resist, until I gave up. I could hear him whimper every night, until I went downstairs, and stayed with him until he fell asleep. It was so similar to human loneliness. I brought him to the vet and she couldn't find anything physically wrong with him, and she put it down to grieving. Thankfully a year on, he's the happiest dog in the world again. Polar bears are smart as fuck. They will purposely try to deceive you, and even mock you. Bastards. Edit. People want me to elaborate. Here you go. You always work protected contact with polar bears, fencing barriers between you and them. There is usually a small gap running along the bottom which is large enough for a bear to get the front part of their paw through, so you never stand up close to the stainless steel fencing. The fence is usually some kind of 2x2 holes that you can pass food through, and there are food chutes too. Mocking me. One time I decided to have a play session with one of the bears. I took bucket lids, which are small enough to slide under the gap I mentioned earlier, and smeared them with peanut butter, honey, and other treats. Then I got on the ground in front of the pen, and was zipping the lid back and forth on the ground, just out of reach. The bear was pouncing along and having fun, and finally when I faked him out, and he pounced left, I shot the lid under, to cage to the right air hockey style. He went bounding after it, ate the treats, and came back with it in his mouth. This is the mocking part. He sat down in front of me with the lid still in his mouth and just looked at me for a few seconds. Then he dropped the lid to the floor, put a paw on it, and proceeded to zing it back and forth just out of my reach, like I did to him. Bears, 1 keepers, 0. The deceiving part. One bear I worked with was very sneaky and would try to trick new people. They love it when you act startled. So if you're a jumpy person, you might as well paint a giant target on your forehead, because they will try to act like they are not paying attention to you, and then Randy Orton style, out of nowhere, leap up and hit the bars at full height, and make freak out. So back when I was new to this bear, I accidentally dropped a fish on my side of the bars. Your instinct is to pick it up, but that is exactly what you should not do, because that puts you too close to the cage. He tried to stick his paw under and get it, but couldn't quite get it. He tried and tried, made sad puppy sounds, etc. But I ignored the fish on the ground, finished our session, and walked away. After I got a few paces away, I looked back just in time to see him stick his paw under the bars, fully engulf the fish no problem, and pull it back under and eat it. Now, I'm not a zookeeper, but I have seen animals do some pretty cool things. In 5th grade, we went on a school field trip to the zoo, and I witnessed the most amazing trolling ever done by a gorilla. So, all these kids are swarming the glass of the gorilla exhibit, and are banging on it because kids suck. Now, this gorilla is sitting there taking it like a goddamn champ, but then he gets up. He presses his buttocks to the screen, spreads his ass cheeks, and begins to shit everywhere. It was the most disgusting display I have ever seen, but us 10-year-olds being 10-year-olds thought it was hilarious. Then he begins to lick the shit off of the glass. That's when everyone is grossed out. Of course, the teachers are yelling that we needed to be mature. I'm sure they were disgusted too. After King Kong here is done licking his crap, he plops back down on the ground and just stares at us. Oh, he knows what he's doing. He begins to masturbate and bares his teeth, literally a shit-eating grin. The teachers dragged us off after that, but we got the message that this guy wanted to be left alone. I have 2 dogs, a 10-pound Shih Tzu and a 120-pound Rottweiler. The little one is older and missing a few bottom teeth. Anyway, I buy them different sized chewy bones. The little one will take his smaller treat and go off and put it somewhere in plain sight. Then walk away and wait. Our dumb big puppy will naturally be stingy and go to grab the second bone, but can't fit both in his mouth. So my little dog scoops right on in and grabs the bigger one every time. You think he'd learn eventually, but he never does. My grandfather had a brackish water pond in his backyard. He would go down to fish, and Joe the alligator would creep to the opposite side of the pond and scare all the fish over to my grandpa's side. Then, like clockwork, after he caught 4 to 5 fish, Joe would swim closer to where my Gramps was fishing and wait for Gramps to throw him a dead fish. After he ate it, he would go back across the pond. Not as a keeper, but here's a story about my cat. I was snuggling up to the little fella one night. My cat doesn't like being too close to anything and usually gets annoyed quickly. However, this one time he gave me a sideways glance with narrowed eyes, a look that plainly said, boss, what do you think you're doing, you fucking weirdo?" I was in shock. The look was so human. You only ever see it in the eyes of people. I spent that night wondering whether my cat is one of those, an emoji from the Harry Potter series. Even now, if my cat is in the room, I treat him as though he's human, which basically means that I don't even jack off when he's home in case he understands what I'm doing and gets all grossed out. The manipulation. I did face painting and caricatures at a zoo, not a zookeeper, but we went through the same basic training all zoo employees do. Beware the monkeys. They seem to hate visitors staring at them all day, so the ones with wire enclosures are dastardly. They start flipping around on the ropes that hung from above, really showing off. These monkeys had learned when they do this, all the people come running over as fast as they can for a look. Once a monkey has a large crowd, it pisses through the bars trying to hit as many people as possible, grinning as the crowd is now all shrieking and trying to get away. Those bastards know what they're doing. I know because one of the booths I was stationed at was right by them, and several times a week I'd hear their ooh-ahing and clapping, followed a few moments later with screaming and panic. I think the rhino intentionally aimed at guests too, but he didn't manipulate a crowd to come over. If you see a rhino, aim with it, but at the crowd, so it's like a super soaker filled with slunk piss. You do not want to be there when that thing goes off. The last weird thing is the animals treat their coworkers differently. I'm sure they recognize the uniform and associate it with the people that feed the masks, that's why. Still, it's a combination of awesome and chilling when in a park it with people and the animals feigning deafness, so the idiots stop making stupid noises, will suddenly turn and watch you, focusing on you alone among all those people. Most of the animals generally ignore guests, but get excited and happy when they see an employee in uniform get near. They act extra playful and cute, kinda like cats, before they get fed. I have other zoo stories, but they don't pertain to the question anymore, so I'll just leave it at that. Close bracket. I'm no zookeeper, but there is this episode of the podcast Radio Lab where they talk about an orangutan named Fu Manchu. The story goes that Fu Manchu would often break out of his enclosure and the zookeepers would find him in the trees outside. This happened once or twice before the zookeepers starting watching the orangutans through CCTV and trying to figure out just how Fu Manchu was getting out. They then observed Fu Manchu with a makeshift key, made out of wire or something, that he was using to jimmy open the door to the enclosure and get out. The zookeepers were surprised, since no one had ever taught Fu Manchu this, or had even done anything remotely similar in front of him. Fu Manchu had learned to pick a lock with a length of wire on his very own. Apparently, the Locksmiths Union gave Fu Manchu an honorary membership. But orangutans are pretty clever and are able to build and use tools, so this wasn't a very unique event. So the next day, they went up to Fu Manchu, searched him and took the key away. But a few days later, Fu Manchu is out of his enclosure again. They put him back in and search him, but there's no sign of the key. So they go back to watching him on CCTV and this time, they are astounded. Because what they see is that Fu Manchu had hidden a length of wire inside his mouth, wrapped inside his lower lip. In the podcast, they talk about why this is interesting, because it means that Fu Manchu was actively trying to deceive the zookeeper, and deception requires a much higher level of cognition. As they say in the podcast, deception requires that the deceiver get into the mind of the person that they are deceiving. In other words, it requires an animal to anticipate what a human would think and do, and then actively try to fool them. This kind of higher level behavior has rarely, if ever, been seen among animals. I'm not a zookeeper, but I do like animals. I mean, come on, they are awesome. 2 instances of gorillas protecting human children come to mind, both on YouTube, and also reading about dolphins protecting humans too, from drowning or sharks. Just incredible to know that some animals seem to have a sense for life and preserving it for other beings.